most people will recognize me with this hat I
Yeah.
usually use, right? But I can't use it with this headphone on. I just realized that. And I can't hear you unless the headphones are on. So
You
it
know,
becomes crazy.
in some way, you have inspired my childhood because
Did I really?
then I started wearing this too.
Oh, good, good, good. I remember when I first wore it on
Yeah.
Incredible Tales. I don't know what possessed me to do it. I just did it. And it's damn hot country to do that in, but we were in air conditioning most of the time. And
Yeah.
somebody wrote this newspaper article, a critique or something like that. I mean, who is this guy with a fedora hat in the middle of Singapore, and now everybody and their mother is wearing one?
Yeah.
So it's like, wow.
Maybe you might have been inspired by Indiana Jones. I saw your video, the one that you created.
Well, actually, it's a bad hair day,
Uh,
and so I had no comb and stuff. I said, "What do I have? Oh, give me that hat, and I'll put that on." I usually wear it in my classes, but yeah,
yeah, I know all about Bad Hair Day. So, well, let's get
yeah,
on to today's show. Afterlife, you have a near-death encounter once upon a time. I think twice, in fact. Once in your youth, and
yeah.
then once again when you had the heart transplant. Was it the one where your chest burst out and there were evil forces trying to take your life? But there was a Armenian nun or Armenian nurse who was kind enough, a benevolent spirit who guided you through the tough times.
Oh, I love these summaries. They make you sound crazy, actually, a little bit. Just really. But thank you for putting it so succinctly. Well, my chest didn't burst out, and my ribs literally fell out of my body because I had undergone a bypass just
Yeah.
5 or 6 days before that, and I had told the doctor that he screwed up, that the plate actually broke, and he said it's not possible, and he kept saying that for a while. And the physiotherapist kept coming and saying, "All you have to do is exercise, exercise." I had to fire them. These were doctors, and I said,
Mm.
"You go away. I don't want you." Da 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 da. But he was so insulted. He was very bad. It took me a while to get him quiet again because he was making such a big stink, and so finally they relented, opened it up, and poof, everything came out, and it was like I was not expected to live.
Yeah.
Loss of blood was massive. It's like crazy. So I was
Yeah.
on the edge, and so during that semi coma time,
Mm.
I was being visited by energies, things, beings, whatever you want to call them, and healed. And I still have the marks actually. And some people actually were there, observing, seeing, taking pictures, trying to figure out what exactly is happening in that room right now till today. Nurses are visiting that same floor, the 12th
Mm.
floor, Ward 30, where
Mm.
this being shows up and literally heals the people who are there. So if you want that kind of healing, go there. It has to be put in that room. Something's there. So I'm not sure
But does this
what.
entity visit everyone, or are
Everyone.
there some people
Well,
who are selected for it?
apparently it chooses, and I don't know what its criteria
Mm,
is
mm,
because I asked some questions when I started getting better and was being visited. And so, of course, you want to know more and so on and so forth. And apparently comes, and several other people, not just me, have
mm,
described this because the nurses have been there for a long time.
mm,
And so they've had a chance to meet a lot of people and said, you're not the first one to describe this rather short, stout woman dressed a bit like a nun, but not really, and so on and so forth. And so it's literally from the late 1800s
mm.
that woman lived, apparently. And of course, the hospital is built on a Armenian graveyard.
Yeah.
So obviously, so it became interesting.
So if you guys want to find out more about that story, tune in to episode 1 again on Beyond Paranormal. But today,
Yeah.
you have gone to the edge of life and death, and for most people, we say that when we are at that spot, we always see a light at the end of the tunnel. Do you see anything like that?
You're not talking about my wedding night. Yeah. No, just kidding. uh, there is. I have to. Uh, it's a book I'm finishing. It's 9 years in the writing. Can you
Mm.
imagine? I spit out 157 books in the last 9 years, all as avoidance strategy to finish this book. Basically, which is I call it the realm of masters, because when I persuaded the being that was there, said it's not yet time, you have to go back. I argued. I remember arguing with him, and I think it might have been Jesus or some figure that beyond description. He let me go. Let me go in and visit. And then he said, "You have to return, though." I said, "Sure, no problem." And besides, I don't have a choice in that. So I started being shown everything everywhere around. I started learning about groups and soul groups. I started to understand a little bit more how life evolved, how people came and left,
Mm.
what people did, what the purpose of life was, why are we on this earth, and so on and so forth. What's the nature of reality? Went even down, can you believe at that age, went down to the level of discussing um, quantum physics and being in two places at one time by location. How is it possible to travel at the speed of thought? Things
Mm.
like this, and so on and so forth. And so I got my answers. And so slowly, bit by bit, they're coming forward in some of my books and some of my
Mm.
lectures and some of my programs.
How do we reconcile all this? Like what you just mentioned to me
Yeah,
would be considered in some circles as pseudoscience, but you yourself, you are a psychologist first and
yeah,
also a parapsychologist.
yeah.
Wouldn't this put you in a situation where your peers will attack you or
Well,
in
yeah, yeah.
intellect?
Well, that's why the hesitancy for the last 20 odd years
Hmm.
of trying to bring it up in a left-handed little way, to just throw it in there occasionally. And maybe it's time, because as I'm getting older, I
Hmm.
realize that all of this will die with me and
Yeah.
nobody will ever know. And so when I start thinking about the scientific method, I mean, I don't know if you realize it, but somewhere in the 8th century, a book was written called the Tibetan Book of the Dead,
Hmm.
which became essential reading for a lot of people who wanted to understand what enlightenment was, what the process of life was, what happens to you after you die. It was a monk who wrote it. I can't remember his name. It's one of those multi-syllable names like Padma Sambaravam Bam Bam, like
Hmm.
that. But the whole idea is encouraging people to recognize that you are not a human being having a spiritual experience, but instead you are a spiritual being having a unique and very temporary human experience, and not just one, but several
Hmm.
along the way. And what is the purpose of doing that?
Uh-huh.
Um, well, to be able to learn enough that you don't have to come back again. It's like school, like Earth is a school. And not everybody is at the same level. Some people are in grade 1, some people in grade 12, or primary, no, secondary 4, and so on and so forth, university level, and so on and so
Hmm.
forth.
Hmm.
So not everybody knows what you know, and not everybody, and you don't know what a lot of people know as well. So if you come up with some of these phenomena, they have to be observed, and some of them have to be experienced. So the
Hmm.
scientific method rejects or eliminates every procedure that seeks to manipulate reality in a very whimsical way. When people go by consensus, that's not scientific. Just because a whole bunch of people agree with it, that's not scientific.
Hmm.
It just has to be reproducible in any lab. If you use a particular method, like the one you and I were talking about before, where you use a certain form of frequency manipulation, meditation techniques, whatever,
Hmm.
to make contact with whoever, CSETI or whatever it is you want to use, a protocol. Either way, these are things that are um, real as opposed to not objectified.
Hmm.
So if somebody sits here and says to you, "Hey, listen, I communicate with UFOs," and you go, "Okay, come sit down. When was the last time you had a good meal?" So your brain worked, so on and so forth. But then again, what if that person who told you that was Nikola Tesla?
Then it's a different story.
That's what he said. He
Mm.
got his inventions from an extraterrestrial source
Yeah.
that kept dictating it to him, so he kept drawing it out. How about that young lady who started painting at the age of 4 and lived in a town less than an hour away from me in Illinois, Chicago? Her name was Akane. And she looks like one of these Nordic type women who's age
Mm.
4 had a communication with an extraterrestrial source that told her to go into painting. And now her
Mm.
paintings, like the one especially called the Prince of Peace, and you find it
Mm.
all over, the representation of Jesus the Christ. So you have a lot of people who say they've been inspired. Mozart, this boy
Yeah.
genius, said that he listens to the music of the spheres. And he doesn't know why, but when he's in a certain state, it all comes in. So, according to science, something is a law when a theory is confirmed several times,
Mm.
and the results are the same. Every time you have Newton's law, you have Archimedes' law, you have the theory of relativity, and all of them becoming law as more and more experiments come up. So, as a scientist, I wonder if there's a different way of analyzing that's not through the physical senses that's discovered it. Is
Yeah.
because we are now talking about things outside of your physical senses. How is it reproducible that way? It's going to be very difficult, and you're going to need certain people with an ability to see beyond, or hear beyond, or feel beyond, and so on and so forth. So, what if it becomes evidence without being observed by the physical senses? What if
Mm.
the hypothesis breaks the rule, but is so evident that there is not the slightest doubt because it
Mm.
continues to break the rule every time? What if the experimentation that is not made in the lab, because it was only could only be measured by non-existent 21st century technology?
Yeah.
What if we haven't come to a paradigm that's being able to provide for us some way in which we could harness a new form of energy that nobody knows the mechanics of? I mean, till today, we do not know what magnetism is.
Mm.
We do not know what electricity is, but we use it. We know how to harness its power. Why? Because we have a theory about electrons going through wires and so on and so forth. This is just a theory. There are
Mm.
people in Canada, in New Zealand, and in Bulgaria, the guy who created the water driven car, who has disappeared, by the way. All of these certain discoveries went against the theory of. And so they went back to basics and reproduced a different theory and
Yeah.
started to prove it in mechanical devices. What if reincarnation could be measured? When you think about fire when it was first discovered, say
Mm.
for instance, right? Was a scientific experiment carried out to check it
No.
out? No, not
No.
at all. The wheel, when it was first discovered, was a scientific experiment carried out?
It just
No,
worked.
it just went into use.
Mm.
So when paint for decorating ceilings and walls were first discovered, did they try out a scientific experiment? No, they just used it. And so when you start thinking about all these things, like even a boat floating on the sea or a sail working, no scientific experiments were carried out. It's just simply the way it worked,
Mm.
alongside an explanation, which was a theory of how it
Mm.
worked. So you provide a theory, and you want to objectively create reproducible results for everybody.
Right.
Then you have a law that you put into place. If you understand the nature of enlightenment and all these monks who didn't have a language for this before.
Mm.
Like, say, for instance, Buddha, who said, I am awake. And when he first became enlightened, and somebody said, what's up with you? Are you drunk? He said, no, I'm not drunk. He says, are you mad? He said, no, I'm not mad. Are you then why are you so happy? He said, because I'm awake. The Hindu word or Sanskrit word at that time was Bud. I am Bud. I'm awake. And so the woman who observed this said to him, then I'll call you Buddha, which is one who is awake. And he said, yeah, I like it. Yeah, stick with that. Tell everybody who I am. And so, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but but that's how he got his name. And so he started to talk about a different way to
Yeah.
see things, a different
Mm.
perspective.
in some teachings, right, that's what they say, right? The spirit will come back again over and over in multiple cycles with the sole purpose of learning about yourself, learning how to be enlightened. And that's where the light body happens and you ascend. Again, in different religions, some would think that you ascend to heaven, ascend to nirvana. Some even believe that you
It
go up
doesn't
to
stop there.
the planet Nibiru, where you meet other sentient beings up. And it's also very interesting when you talk about people like Nikola Tesla, and we have various other individuals who, across time in history, have actually came up to talk about their experience through a dream. Most of them, when they create a certain innovation, when they founded certain things, it's always, I had this inspirational moment. I had it through a dream. In fact, I was listening to another podcast where they talk about how it was also written in the Bible that some of the characters actually had a dream, and that's where God came to speak to them. However, the other thing that you said, I think was very poignant as well, is a lot of what we're trying to do with science today is trying to replicate what our five senses can detect. But we also know we have more than five senses. However, science have not gone out of that comfort zone to try to recreate things that we cannot see, feel, or hear in the lab. Or maybe it is, maybe the quantum physicists, they are doing things like that. And now, speaking of past life and reincarnation, two particular cases stood out for me. And when you say things that in the realm of science, it must be able to be replicated.
Yeah.
We have multiple evidence out there, anecdotal evidence. One is Devi Shanti, a lady from India, and another James III, who was a World War II pilot. So the cases for these two is very hard to debunk because one of them really claimed that she knows all the facts of her past life. She could recognize her son, her husband, and mind you, this was even before the years of internet. There was no way she could have searched or Googled information from her town or any details of her husband and child from Facebook, but she recognized them. Observers went with them to her hometown and she could immediately tell you, this is where to go, this is what it was. There was a yellow wall here, but now it's painted white. There was a well here, but now it's covered. So things that people could not possibly know, she knows very well, even to where she's hidden her money under the floorboard. And her husband says, yes, that was where I found the money. When we have things like that out in the open, but yet science still wants to deny it. There are people out there who are still trying to find ways to shut all this down.
Reader's Digest did a program. They collected all the cases and literally interviewed each and every one of these kids. And there are thousands now under the umbrella in science of what we call Metam Psychosis. That's the scientific term for reincarnation. Metam Psychosis. And it's a form of mind or state of mind where you start to remember things that you should not have any memory of at age 4, 5, 3. Little children in India and so on and so forth. Now, here's an interesting fact. As we did the study at the Moody Institute or the Newton Institute in California, where Michael Newton and I were friends early on in the year 2008, 2009 period when he was expanding. And he died in 2016, I think, somewhere around there. It was tragic because he had a lot more to bring to the world in trying to figure out not only what was happening in your past life, but what was happening in between lives. What is that space between life and what do you experience? And I think that tells us more about the nature of reality than anything else. But continuing with all the children who are remembering things, in the Western countries, quote unquote Western countries, you have, when we do regression hypnotherapy with people and take them back into their past lives, you begin to realize that they were reborn everywhere in the world. You know, just literally had a chance to be in Africa and this and this and this. But when we did the study with Asian people and we did the regression with Asian people, most of them came back mostly in Asia. It seems like they were more attached to their land and their religion and so they kept coming back in this Asian. The predominance is more than 50% of them would choose that, which is very, very unusual. But there are 10 signs to be able to recognize a reincarnated soul. Would you like to know what they are?
10 signs.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
go.
yeah. Literally, most of the people that we meaning a whole bunch of people, including myself, we may not be connected at all, but the research is collective after all, and it's all available on the internet. Um, Most of them left before their time. You know, if your loved one died suddenly or tragically, if they left unfinished business, as you say.
Mm.
In fact, I'm writing a book about this called Unfinished Business, just to let you know. And if you believe that they passed on before their proper time, their spirit will, or their soul, spirit, energy, whatever you want to call it, will reincarnate as soon as possible. Literally, so lickety fast, it seems like it only took minutes. And they will be reborn into the circle, where the family circle, where they felt that they were most loved. Just to let you know, and it also allows them to be in a situation that allows them to resolve what they left open
Mm.
when they left the place. The second clue is language. When you take a look at people whose cousins or aunts or whatever the case might be who came back, sometimes when they look at a photo of themselves that stood in a room, and they have no recollection. And that's the same thing with my sister, just to let you know. On the landing in my house is a picture of my mother's mother, and my sister, who's a medical doctor, uh, poo-pooed the fact that there are no uh, what the hell are you talking about, um, because occasionally she would say things when she was younger that my mother would look and say, "You sound just like your grandmother," or it's crazy. And so, but when you look at the picture side by side, there's similarities in how they
Mm.
look, and it's unquestionable, and this has been happening all the time. So you get nuances in language, you see, because sometimes even as a baby they recognize the picture and they go and they'll want to touch it, other
Mm.
than oh, you put all other pictures, but that's the one they gravitate to. And
Mm.
sometimes the child would say words or sing in a foreign language that they shouldn't have, because
Yeah.
the family has migrated to the U.S. or so and so forth. But they speak Armenian, or they speak French, or they speak German fluently, and then all of a sudden that is lost with time.
Mm.
The third thing is mannerisms. Excuse me. When um, uh, actually, this is actually the easiest way to detect a reincarnated soul. Is there are similar gestures with body language, with the laugh, with physical expressions. Personality traits may carry over sometimes, very much like stubbornness or boldness, curiosity.
Mm.
These are distinct qualities of the person that died. And this child, who is 2, 3, 4, shouldn't have learned this from anybody else except their parents, the immediate circle, but they appear to behave like the person who's passed on, even though they are a lot younger than the person who had died at 50 or 60 or 70
Yeah.
years of age. The fourth thing is physical appearance. It's sometimes given that children will look like their parents, like my sister, looks like they're like her great grandmother. And it's very, very interesting because, oh, it wasn't my mother's mother, it was my mother's mother's mother. Does that make sense? So it's her
Great
great
grandmother.
grandmother, yeah,
Yeah.
who came back within that circle. And now sometimes uh, my mother described her as very strict. And when she looks at my sister, it was like, very, what's the word when somebody's not oppressive, a lot less severe, bossy. You're so bossy, just like
Domineering.
domineering. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
word. And she's also that way. And here's the funny part: my father used to be afraid of my mother's mother, you know uh my mother's mother, because he was alive, and she always used to scold him like he's the worst person for my mother, and so on and so forth, and all that. And he approaches my sister with the same dread, his daughter. It's like it's so funny to watch that whole dynamic. So sometimes you have no idea. Sometimes birthmarks are continued in the reincarnation, and again,
Mm.
inexplicably, we don't know the DNA and how it works. Although there's a fellow called Bruce Lipton who suggests that this DNA is controlled by this morphogenetic field, and so therefore the consciousness of the person who died coming into this new child recreates the same birthmark, or the cause of death, or so on and so forth. And and sometimes it's very difficult because it's somebody you're close to, stepfather, mother, brother, sister, wants to make it known that, hey, I'm here, I'm back.
Yeah.
And so they reproduce that birthmark as well. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just about, when you mentioned about how someone died, and it's clear in the new life where he holds some of the marks from the previous life. So when you mentioned that, it triggered my memory and reminded me of a story I would like to share with you. So this guy is Singaporean, by the way. I don't know that man personally, but I know the doctor who was treating him later on. This was actually confessed to me. So it was about this guy who complained that at the age of 23 or 24, all of a sudden he woke up one morning or in the middle of the night, he got a throbbing headache. It was so painful, he couldn't function. So naturally, he took Panadol for just a couple of days, hoping that it would go off. And it didn't. He said, oh, this is terrible. I should go and get it checked because this might be a tumor. So again, he went for a whole scan, an x-ray, couldn't find anything, MRI, couldn't find anything. Doctor said, your brain is fine. There's no tumor, there's no growth. Take painkillers, and painkillers would just work for a while and then the pain would come back. So he says, I don't understand. Why is this pain it's so painful, I can die. It's killing me, right? And someone suggested, why don't you just go for hypnotherapy? So I'm not sure how it jumped from medical into hypnotherapy, but he must have been so desperate because he lived the pain for 24 to 27. So that's about 3 years of living with pain every day. And he couldn't work. It just really affected his quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
So he eventually decided to go for hypnotherapy, where he did a past life regression. And in the past life, when he went through the whole process, and he saw himself dying as a young man with a hammer blow to the back of his head. And when he found out about that, and he went back to his parents and all that to say, hey, this is what I found out about me, about myself. I have a past life regression and I was hit at the back of my head. And that's why in this life, my head hurts. Mom, can you freaking believe it? This sounds insane. I just wasted my money going to that doctor. He told me that the reason why I'm having this pain is because of my past life. And his mom said, yeah, when you were born as a baby, when I was cradling you, there was a huge birthmark on the back of your head that's red, like at the same spot where you say it's hurting. Mm-hmm. And of course, we didn't think too much about that. Hair started to grow out, and he don't remember there's a birthmark on the back of his head. So when his mom said that, the doctor said that, and he's desperate, right? Mm-hmm. So he says, what the hell? Since I've already gone for the first session, I've already paid money, might as well just go to the second session and see how. And people don't understand that hypnotherapy and past life regression, it's not just like how we see in a Hollywood movie. Stare at this chain. I'm going to swing it. I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm going to tell you about your past life. No, it doesn't work that way. And I'm sure Dr. Gill, you can tell us more about that later on. So it was multiple sessions to get him prepared to do his proper past life regression and to come to terms with what they call it, I don't know, residue karmic. No, not even karmic. That's a different term. Coming to terms with that past life memory. Mm-hmm. And eventually, when he confronted himself, his past soul or past memory, and says, you are now dead. You are free to go. This is a new life. And when he came to that realization and he accepted that understanding, the pain just vanished overnight. Mm-hmm. For 3 years, he was living with the pain. For 3 years, painkillers, couldn't do anything. MRI couldn't detect anything. But now, when he went through that past life regression and he came to the understanding that this is my new life, that past life is gone, the pain is gone.
Unfinished business. Mm-hmm. You recognize most of these cases would have unfinished business in the not all the time, but more than 90%. You see the cases would be like that. So yes, it happens all the time. You'd be very surprised when I use regression therapy. again, I use all modalities, cognitive behavioral therapy, some aspects of behavioral therapy modification. Sometimes, not always, do we have to use past life uh, to go into a not past life, but younger. When we go back, regression means going back to when they were younger, and
Mm.
sometimes trauma can be created in the womb, where a child experiences it while it's still unborn,
Mm.
experiences a fight between husband and wife. Its father and mother, and sometimes trauma with blunt blows and so on and so forth. They experience all of that, and so they need to
Mm.
resolve it somehow. And being aware of it and bringing it to consciousness allows you to let go of the pain and allows you to let go of that unfinished business and be able to come back. There have been one or two dramatic instances of people who were reborn in the same city in which they died, but they
Mm.
were killed or murdered, or like you said, in the hit with a hammer in the back of the head or something like that. And they
Yeah.
came back and identified the murderer and described every aspect of this person. And arrests have been made less than 20 years after the person has been murdered or killed. And it seems odd and very strange, but that's where you want to say, what goes around comes around at some point. And so you have to pay attention to that. Or you have to sing the song, If I Had a Hammer. That's,
Maxwell Silverhammer. That's another one.
yeah. But if you want to continue on recognition and trying
Yes.
to
Yes.
understand,
Yeah.
when people say the eyes are the windows to the soul,
Mm.
there's a good reason for that. Because when somebody can't speak or speaks a different language, we can absorb their emotions. We can understand just what to say or what they want to say by looking in their eyes. When they say, "Oh," and you say, "Oh, you want the bathroom? Okay, good." So you direct them either way. So if you look at someone and you a familiar feeling swells up inside of you, it's
Mm.
the eyes of a reincarnated soul. Maybe it's looking back at you, and you begin to have impressions or pictures of that person who died, who might have been close to you, and you don't know why. It just suddenly comes up. You're not forcing it; it just happens.
Mm.
Then you can bet your bottom dollar that that's the person who's come back to meet you or to replay a life pattern without the same original patterns. Maybe your dead brother or father or mother
Mm.
came back as your child. Who knows?
Mm.
And to make this all happen again. I know a woman in Singapore, I can't mention names, who lost her daughter in a car accident.
Mm.
Literally, it was an unfortunate series of circumstances, but within a year, her son was born, and the son was the daughter that died. The daughter
Mm.
was months old, barely a year. And so things like that will happen. The other way to recognize reincarnation is coincidences of time. You have to pay attention to divine timing. There is a higher force. This much I surrender to, even as a scientist or non scientist. It seems to be a coherent, intelligent mind that
Mm.
seems to govern and coordinate things, not just in a space of geography, but over a space of temporality, over a period of time. And it doesn't work like we want to. Well, now, I want everything now. It
Yeah.
takes time. It really takes its time. And it's never a coincidence. You see, the day, the month, the year of every birth are picked carefully. I mean, numerologists may be correct with this because what we look at as chaos is actually mathematics, but at a level we cannot comprehend. And numbers are holding all us together. When you take a look at every life form around us, it contains the Fibonacci series, the flower of life patterns, and what
Mm.
have you. It's not a coincidence, but it's more complex than you can ever imagine. For example, a baby may be born in your family on the same day, of the year as a person who's passed on, signaling that the old soul actually chose the day of its passing to become new again. So there's method to this madness, or when they chose this. The other way to recognize if somebody is reincarnated is other senses, other people around you sense the same thing as well. It's a very big clue when your loved one has come back, is that other people around you, not just you, feel the warmth, the comfort, the recollection of that old soul that died,
Mm.
that they've known before. They may point out uncanny semblances, like I said before, in behavior and speech. Maybe it's the way the person looks. Maybe it's the things that they find that they love, and so on and so forth. Um, Another way to recognize is I had a client who was devastated when her mother suddenly passed away in another car accident.
Mm.
Not to worry, I told her she'll come back as your daughter. Several years later, my client was overjoyed when she gave birth to a girl. I mean, this was when I had a company in Singapore in Jurong. It was very interesting, and I didn't know how I knew, and I didn't know why I blurted it out. That's so unprofessional of me to do that. But the child was definitely this new embodiment of her
Uh-huh.
mom's spirit. She was even involved in a car accident early in her life. The girl survived, of course, unharmed,
Yeah.
overcoming this karma that, if you want to use the word karma or pattern, that her soul had brought over from its past life. So a
Mm.
reincarnated soul may be, what's the word, born under certain circumstances, or maybe lives through these parallel events with its past lives, but obviously with different results. So this always gives you an opportunity to conquer and work out old karma, and
Mm.
and work out old learning patterns. And finally, the way in which you recognize a past soul is you may
Mm.
suffer a certain pressing emptiness, since your loved one died. And nothing has been able to fill it. A husband, a son, a daughter, whatever the case might be, maybe not even the endless love of other people that come into your life. That's because that void can only be filled by this unique energy pattern of the
Mm.
presence of the one who was gone. And then when that person shows up as the reincarnated form, you get this profound sense of fulfillment that mends all your wounds.
Yeah.
This sentiment, means that this soul has returned in your life. So these are ways, so far. I mean, they're logical conclusions that we've come up to recognize how, again, without scientific methodology,
Yeah.
how to recognize that. Because when you start to create scientific proof, I don't know what kind of scientific verification did Albert Einstein perform when, after many theories and laws and books, and discovered that the most powerful force in the universe was love. I mean, he said it out of his own mouth. None. He observed that evidence came long before the science comes for it.
The topic I want to talk about today, to close off the show,
Yeah.
is about this lady called Samantha Katie James. Many of you might not recognize this name, but you will definitely recognize the word ex Miss Malaysia. So she recently came under fire for saying that black people shouldn't make too much noise because it was them who chose their life. When I read that, I knew what she was getting at. Again, I'm not defending the things that she said. That has really riled a lot of people and really ruffled feathers in the wrong way. But looking objectively at as what she was talking about, is there something we can comment about?
So this woman, the model, the supermodel,
Yeah,
whatever her name is,
Samantha James.
she's not wrong. But then again, you are speaking to not conscious beings. And
Mm.
so it's very difficult. And it's not that they didn't choose, their Atman, their oversoul, decided that these are the lessons we're going to learn. Where not everybody is meant to have an easy life. You
Mm.
see, this law of attraction garbage peddlers out there are telling you can have as much money, you can make it. No, no, not. It's not meant for you. Some of these things, some of them are meant for everything else and something else, and so on and so forth. You can
Yeah.
participate, but to a level, because otherwise it's going to affect everything else.
Yeah.
The reason you went through the trials and tribulations you went through was because it was chosen in that group. All
Mm.
of you chose, all of you decided you're going to be this, and then some of you will object and said, no, that's too much pain, can I have something else? And so you chose to be able to do all of these things and make it happen. But how can you explain this to anyone other than those who are at an enlightened level.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. What she could have said in a way was, this is a very, very heavy burden to bear, to be black in a society
Yeah.
that is filled with Ku Klux, lovers and people who think that white supremacy is real, and so on and so forth. It's a very heavy burden for them to bear. My soul goes out to them. If there's anything I can do to help them, please let me know, and I'll do that. And maybe that you leave it at that. Same with everybody who goes through. That's why you have to be kind to everybody, because you don't know
Yeah.
what pain they are going through. People who are, well, you talked about last time, possessed. People who are experiencing one disease or another. People who've lost a body part. People who lost somebody they loved. I mean, be as sympathetic and send love. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, the most powerful energy you can send is love. And even though you can see the purpose of it, it's not up to you to speak it unless
Yeah.
you can fly up in the sky and show people who you are, and turn water into wine and things like that. Yeah, unless you're that guy, don't even attempt.
Yeah.
It's not going to be received well.
And that will bring us to episode 3, where I'll be talking to Dr. Gill once again on remote viewing and astro traveling. For today, my name is Eugene Tay, your host, along with my very special guest for this season, Dr. Mel Gill. You're watching Beyond Paranormal. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
What did you find? You are listening to Supernatural Confessions.